Difficult times at Tottenham Hotspur, and the next 48 hours could yet define Thomas Frank's tenure. Welcome to the latest episode of Talking Tottenham with myself, Ryan Taylor and Alasdair Gold. Talking Tottenham is sponsored by NordVPN. Ali, this pod has really become our Spurs therapy, hasn't it?
Yeah, I kind of felt like the last one was a little bit more positive. We were talking about transfers and at least things might be able to change a little bit. And then along came Dr. Tottenham for West Ham and just a messy last, 24 hours or so, a bit more, 36 hours maybe. It's just Tottenham Hotspur. There is no other way. It just always seems to be a big old dollop of chaos going on. And now we have ahead a very, very awkward day at Hotspur Way, followed by what I just hope is a miraculous night at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Otherwise, it's going to be horrendous.
Let's jump straight into it, Ali. Obviously, It's well documented now that Thomas Frank is under increasing pressure following... You know, it's been a process that's gone on since the start of the season, really. The lack of results, poor performances, but just a real sense of frustration amongst the fan base. But as far as we understand it, what's the latest with Frank's future? Because you're heading to Hotspur Way shortly for a press conference, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm in this world of football, and especially Tottenham Hotspur, I'm so almost scared of saying anything is definitive right now because of how ridiculous the situation is. But right now, as of recording this, the expectation is that we'll finish recording this. I shall do a tiny bit more extra work, and then I will head off to Hotspur Way, where Thomas Frank is expected to be taking the training session, which will be part open to the media for 15 minutes or so. And then we'll head into a press conference about 3:30 with him and one of his players. You would imagine a very experienced player they're going to have to put alongside him, whether it's Vicario or Paulinho or someone like that. And Thomas Frank is going to have to face... I do feel for him. I think it's going to be a really, really difficult press conference. I thought the one after the game was bad enough against West Ham. And this one, for me, it's... Look, in a wonderful world for Thomas Frank, he pulls off a very, very difficult task of winning against Dortmund and gives himself some breathing room. But the likelihood and the feeling towards it is it's almost feels like such a horrible phrase to use, but it feels a bit like dead man walking kind of thing. And it's going to be reflected in this press conference and what he's going to have to be asked and everything. And I must say, I do feel like, and we're all guilty of this, especially as fans of our respective clubs and everything. Sometimes you kind of disassociate and disconnect with the human being involved. And I've noticed, and it's always going to be the case, of course. And social media, they've just gone after him. And in the ground, of course, the booing isn't so much that same thing, but some of the things shouted at him as he walked down the tunnel as he left and things like that. And I think maybe because we have this kind of, certainly weekly, sometimes 3-4 times a week at the moment, this connection with him and dealing with him, we kind of see the human behind it. We see the person is trying desperately hard to be a success at Tottenham and try and bring something to this club that is positive. And obviously it's just not working. And it's horrible to talk about anyone potentially losing their job. You know, we're in an industry where people are losing their jobs left, right and centre all the time. So we know kind of what a rubbish thing it is. And I know it's different circumstances, different pay grades, all this sort of stuff, but it's still never a nice experience for anyone. So it just kind of all adds together to this press conference. Is going to be just a really, really difficult one for him because he's going to be asked a lot of questions, not only about his future, but what people have said to him in recent days. And I had to ask him the other day about, and I felt sorry in asking, I even apologised before I asked it, but it had to be asked. What's it like to be sung at by 17,500 people in the South Stand? You're getting sacked in the morning. That must be rubbish, mustn't it?
It must be so difficult. I think, obviously, me and you were both at the game and just the emotion in the stadium. I've seen so many times at Spurs, like you said, the boos, and there was the Fulham game earlier in the season, but that was something I've never seen before or experienced, I don't think, at any club or ground since I've been a journalist. I think you do have to feel for Frank, but at the same time, you can understand why supporters who pay so much money to follow the club feel, absolutely let down and furious. And I think actually,
it's a build-up,
being honest, I think
build-up of frustration as well, isn't it?
is.
It's not just on Thomas Frank. It's of the whole malaise over recent years, I think, as well. It's come to a head.
It has, and I actually wrote in my intro from the report. Sorry, just when you think things can't get any worse for Thomas Frank's Tottenham, they do, because they have this uncanny ability to just sink to a new low, or there's a new twist. And I'm actually at the point now where I think it's actually down to the club to sort of accept that maybe he isn't, the right fit, and actually to put him out of his misery, because I see a man, strip back the football and we talk about the personal level. I see a man that's really struggling, and, he is giving his best, but I think it's clear that he's just not the right fit for the club or for, the team. And I just don't see him succeeding, even if he was to have a miraculous upturn in form. I just really think this is a man that's, he wore the look of a beaten man when he walked down the tunnel. And, we have to put ourselves in his position. It must be incredibly distressing to obviously hear that, but deep down he knows that he can't blame the supporters for feeling the way they do, because it's just been so bad over the past few months, the brand of football. But I actually look at the table now, Ali, and look at West Ham and Forest, and there's a tiny bit of momentum built this weekend in terms of the results that they've got. Yeah. Given Spurs fixtures and how some of the top sides that they're facing over the coming months, weeks, I fear that actually Spurs could maybe get a little bit closer to the bottom sides, which seems absolutely scandalous, but I generally feel that way. And you've got Leeds and Bournemouth, who, again, they look capable of maybe getting some results. I'm not for 1 minute saying Tottenham are being threatened with relegation, but I think it's a similar situation to last season, where they're just going to be around that sort of, bottom chunk of the table if they don't sort of really knuckle down and get some results.
Yeah, I mean, well, you said it with the fixtures. Once they get past Burnley away, which in itself is not the easiest one, as you'll very well know, they've just drawn with Liverpool.
Yeah.
So you've got straight after that, what is it? Man City, Man United, Arsenal, Newcastle. Is that the 4 in a row? Yeah. I mean, even in a good Tottenham world, that's very difficult to get points from. So you're quite right. They could be in a horrendous position in 5 matches' time in the Premier League. And I do wonder I don't know, the thinking behind it all, because there were a few of us that straight after the game did feel a little bit like it's too tight a turnaround for him to be kind of gone before Dortmund. It felt like, because you would have your meetings on the Sunday, presumably, and then straight away there's a press conference on the Monday and training, and then the game the next day. So it would be difficult. And also, it's quite, I mean, we're going to talk about potential people that they might be looking at and everything, but it's very difficult to probably bring in a mostly new staff to take that on, because it's not like there was a rare instance with Antonio Conte where he departed and kind of gave his blessing to the rest of his squad, his coaching staff to continue. Yeah. It was a disaster. Stellini took over, and it was absolutely dreadful for a couple of games. But I'd be surprised if in Thomas Frank's situation it would be the same, that people like Justin Cochran, all that, would stay when he'd just gone. Obviously, Heitinger's a bit of a strange one, because he's just come through the door in a move that was led by Thomas Frank, and potentially could end up being an interim coach for him, because he's done it before at Ajax. I know his permanent spell wasn't successful, but he actually had a reasonable caretaker spell at Ajax. Although, again, you could argue that's someone that knows the club inside out. It's a bit different to just parachuting into Tottenham and trying to do the same. We felt the turnaround was too quick maybe for that one, but you kind of feel like if it goes the way that, let's be honest, on paper it could well go tomorrow night, then there's a little bit more time for them to put things in motion. Ultimately, it's a huge test of them understanding there's a huge job to do at Tottenham. I think Thomas Frank, he might have even admitted it. It was probably more of a surprise at how big the job was at Spurs. And certainly I think people like Vinay Venkatesham, all that, have come in and realise, or actually, I think he maybe even mentioned it in his program thing about the level of where they need to be compared to where they are being huge. But also, it's so difficult because on one hand, you think you need patience, you need time, you need to stop this cycle of a manager changing would normally be every other season, but right now it could be within months. But then that's also got to be coupled with the fact that I've used this analogy before. It's like you can jump on a train, but if you jump on the wrong train and stay on it and show patience, you could end up in completely the wrong destination, and that's going to be the worry. And I've never seen. I mean, have you kind of covering Spurs as you have, but also looking from the outside as well before that? Have you ever seen Spurs fans go for a manager like this? There's been other managers that have really slated the club, have really been. I mean, Nuno, ironically, the man that beat him the other day, made a team with Harry Kane and Sonny in it look absolutely awful. I don't even think Thomas Frank's team is that bad, but he has got it. Why do you think he's got it more than any other manager in the probably, since pre-Poch times?
I think it's probably because he's also the subject of the fury that's being directed towards the board, if that makes sense. So obviously he has to front that up. It's very rare. I know they've done a kind of few in-house bits, but it's rare we actually see the figures at the very top sort of speaking out. They do it once or twice a season, maybe. I know Vinay obviously did the letter, but Thomas Frank is the figurehead really of this Spurs, this disastrous Spurs situation at the moment. So I think all the anger, even towards the players, Frank, because his team and he's responsible for the team, he's the one that faces it. Because I think every Spurs fan knows on a human level, Frank is a nice man. He's I just think he's not the right fit, and ultimately it's clear it's probably not going to work out. So the fans are just so desperate to see that change, because it's like trying to persist with something you're almost like wasting time, if that makes sense. And I mean that respectfully to Frank, but you're right. I mean, the outrage in the stadium as I said, on Saturday, was something I've never experienced before. There was one guy, I was sort of finishing my report about 20 minutes after the full-time whistle. I don't know if you were there, Ali. You might have still been there as well. But there was one guy who'd sort of been sitting down in the stadium and just sort of taking it all in. And as he left, he just shouted, "I friggin' hate this club," at the top of his voice. And it's just
yeah. I did hear that. It was over from the left, wasn't it?
Left,
near the kind of the corner of the north and west stand.
Yeah. But I was talking to one of my friends about it, and it's like, in life, some people right now are probably going through a difficult time, whether it's, relationship, stress, work, and you come to watch your football team to get away from, the stresses of life. For 90 minutes, it's and obviously Spurs at the moment are just making people feel, even worse. And it's just
some are the stresses in people's lives, I think.
Exactly. And I don't know. As I said, I happen to really like Thomas Frank, but I just really think now is the time to change, because we're at the halfway point of the season. And I have mentioned before, but I find changing manager at this stage of a season can be so difficult, because you're sort of in that limbo of, do we get a manager in and maybe pick the wrong guy, or do we sort of ride out and write off the rest of the season and then have a clean slate in the summer? But obviously Spurs need things like the European qualification for the revenue. We've touched on it before, but the likes of Mickey and Kuti, are they going to want to stick around if the club finish sort of 15th? There's no real sign of ambition and progress off the pitch. So it's such a difficult situation, but I really feel like at this moment in time, they need to shake it up. And I just wonder whether, if Matt Wells was still here, maybe they would feel like he was a safe pair of hands.
Yeah, and obviously the obvious one then is Ryan Mason is now available.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that would be too awkward going back to him again, but it might be something that they have to do. Trouble is with him and his career, he kind of then gets kind of painted as perennial caretaker manager rather than a real manager. Not a real manager.
So did Frank Lampard.
Yeah.
Well, although he did manage Chelsea on a permanent basis, but he obviously came back in and didn't really do well, and then went to Coventry doing well. So I feel like for Mason, it could still be good as well, just to boost his profile, because West Brom obviously he struggled and left.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It could be a CV booster, couldn't it? It could be the quickest way to try and look a little bit better if you want a job in the summer. That's fair. But yeah, it's the other thing that kind of I feel about it all is, and this is going to be something that the hierarchy are going to have to deal with. It massively calls into question their whole selection process.
Yeah,
because there was this big thing about having 30 candidates, 10 criteria, going through everything so systematically in this huge process that took it down to 4 candidates. And Thomas Frank was the one that came through with flying colours on top in all of these things. And some of these were like attacking football, connection with the media and the fans and stuff like that. And these are all things that have proved to be utterly the opposite. So are they now currently thinking, well, everything we did to produce what we thought was the best candidate was wrong? So they're kind of questioning their whole process. It makes the next one more kind of worrying because, like you say, they could go for a permanent appointment now, and it could be an absolute disaster. It could be the wrong person at the wrong time, the wrong fit again. And then where do you go from there? And as you said, you potentially start plummeting even further down the table into really difficult places. Very quick question for you. Should Fabio Paratici be involved if there is a change of manager?
Absolutely not.
He should be so far away from this decision. It's unreal.
Absolutely. I mean, I've already made my feelings clear on, how he was partially involved in sort of telling Brennan Johnson that, he was going to be moving on. I think that was wrong, given that the reports out there about Fabio going to Fiorentina. Just to go back to the manager situation, Ali, I think the thing that concerns me most, and it's well known I'm not a Spurs fan, but it does sort of throw up so many questions, is that you've had Jose, you've had Antonio Conte, you've had Ange, you've had Thomas Frank. So they've gone through pretty much the whole collection of, man managers, tough tacticians to Thomas Frank is more of a head coach, which understands working within a structure and things like that, utilises youth, which we actually haven't seen too much, to be honest, at Tottenham, but we'll come on to that. But they've literally gone through the whole array and we don't know what they want, which to me tells me that the actual club is broken somewhat from the top, because they don't have a clear idea of that identity that they want to have, because the messaging over the past 5 to 6 years been very mixed. They've gone in different avenues and it hasn't worked out. I mean, the club not winning silverware under Poch, Mourinho and Conte maybe points towards the fact that actually, the strategy perhaps isn't right, because, they are 3 elite managers. Conte and Mourinho have won trophies in multiple countries and top prizes as well. And of course, Ange has won trophies elsewhere, and he wasn't given the chance to continue. So that's the issue for me. I think the only route we probably haven't seen Spurs go down is kind of the ex-player route. And at the same time, you would ask, well, there isn't many top coaches who are ex-players, but one for me
work with Hoddle.
Yes, obviously that was a little while ago now.
But yeah.
The one for me that I would find interesting and I would be intrigued to see it happen, I don't think for 1 minute it's probably realistic, is Robbie Keane, because he's made inroads at Ferencváros in Hungary, I think won the title, done really well in the Europa League. Clearly a young, ambitious manager who knows the club. I think he would definitely get fans back on board. Whether he's a little bit too inexperienced, maybe so, but I think if you were going to go down that route, he would probably be one that I would definitely think would be intriguing. But outside of that, obviously, there are a number of top managers that are available. So I'm sure we'll discuss those. Yeah,
I think it's probably fair to say there's a smaller pool of potential ex-players, and someone like United, they had to kind of pick recently and picking an interim. There's some that are on the way up. Definitely Keane is one of those. My gut tells me it would be a big jump for him doing that, but you never know. Sometimes those are the risks you take and they do pay off.
Yeah.
Jermaine Defoe is kind of heading on his coaching journey right now. There's people within the club that could be a safe pair of hands in Wayne Bennett, the under-21s manager, who's very respected in the club. You've got Stuart Lewis, who's kind of a real up-and-coming one. Again, would it be too big an early jump? Maybe, but if it's just for a couple of games, perhaps. The other aspect as well is I don't want people to think we're letting the players off the hook either, because the players have been dreadful this
100%.
season as well. And another thing that I do feel, which is just my gut feeling really, is that after winning the trophy with Ange Postecoglou, there's been this feeling of, well, there you go, we can do it kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I just wonder whether they've taken a bit of that into Thomas Frank coming in, and almost like this guy coming in who very much set in certain ways. I want to do this, I want to do that. And maybe some of them, this is just speculating, maybe some of them have looked and, well, what have you won?
Yeah.
We've just won a trophy kind of thing. And I just wonder whether whoever comes in next needs to be someone that they are going to not fear, but
I know what you mean
from the 100%. Off. Even I know it's kind of short term, but I actually thought the Heitinger idea was a good one, because it's someone that's come in, that's been there, done it, has played in World Cup finals and everything, or been involved in everything. And
he's also part of, obviously, Arne Slot's backroom team when they won the Premier League. So he's got that.
Absolutely. I knew you'd have to put that one in there as well. But he's exactly. He's got experience. He's played at the top as well. I don't think it always has to be a great former player or a big former player, but certainly someone that immediately they think, all right,
agree.
Yeah, and I do wonder whether there's been a bit of that with Thomas Frank as well, which has kind of not helped him from the start.
How many occasions as well this season have we seen sort of incidents that you just think certain managers would not stand for in terms of walking off the pitch, or
you see them doing that even to Ange, like Jed Spence and Mickey Buckman ignoring him and walking. But I can't see them doing that.
No, definitely
they know
not.
They get the riot act read at them.
Yeah, exactly that, and they'd probably be banished. I mean, even some of the sort of body language sort of from the players when they were leaving the dressing room on Saturday when I was in the mix zone, it's just like, I don't know, I just feel like it's just at that point where you can just tell that they've almost sort of, I don't want to say given up, but there's just real lack of there's real frustration, but there's almost like they're so annoyed and frustrated with it that they're almost sort of like, I don't want to say done with it, because it's just like you can understand. It's like if you were to lose,
they're a little bit lost.
They're lost. Yeah. That's a great word to use it, and you can see that. And I just think I've seen that body language and demeanour from so many players at various points of this season when we've been at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and they've lost a game. It's almost like dismay, but also fury, sort of combined.
Yeah, and there's a disconnect with the fans right now. I think it kind of goes both ways. I think the fans are just fed up with the players, they're fed up with the football, they're fed up with the club right now. The fans are, but also I think there's a sense of the players feel like the fans are getting on their back as well really quickly. But that comes from the frustration. So like the other day, at the game, we saw that every time there was a slight pause in Vicario trying to work out who to pass to, or there were poor options, poor movement ahead of him, fans would immediately be on him and get on him. And every time they went to take a long throw, because that's associated with Thomas Frank, and if it took, I don't know, 20, 30 seconds or so, people would get annoyed at that, and there'd be kind of this like jeers almost as well. And I really feel like there's this mistrust that's built between the players and the fans as well. And I genuinely think there'd be a few of those players in that dressing room would be delighted to leave the club in the summer. And I think there's probably a few players that the fans would be delighted to see leaving the club in the summer as well, just because they just don't really get on. And there's this, it's such a ridiculous, toxic situation that is allowed to kind of fester and grow within the club. And one little point I wanted to make about something you mentioned earlier about the former managers. The frustrating thing for me is that there's this kind of feeling, or certainly promises, statements about, we're at a stage where now the owners appear to want to back and pay out money and invest in going forward. Yet those managers you spoke of, the Mourinhos and the Contes, would have won stuff had they had that backing back then. It's kind of like, this is the thing about the whole getting on the wrong train kind of thing, is that you've got a manager in Thomas Frank, and they're going to try and say, oh, well, we're going to put money towards this and that. You could argue whether they actually have or not yet. The one sign of Conor Gallagher, but that has actually only has been balanced out by the Johnson sale. But also maybe there's another point of, do we want to spend money on this manager now? It's such a mess.
No.
But if Mourinho or Conte were here and they were getting the kind of funding that they were calling for back in those days, God knows what kind of Tottenham this would be. It would be maybe one in a very different position. And everyone, I'm sure, is probably screaming right now, Pochettino in 2019. You know, they had that summer where they spent money, but let's be honest, it was on just the alternate versions of what you wanted. You know, the Lo Celso instead of Bruno Fernandes, and Ndombele instead of who was it? Barcelona, Dutch player at the
Frankie
time. Frankie de Jong, that was it. That was who he wanted. And Jack Clark coming through the door
as well, wasn't that around that time?
Dybala they wanted, and I think maybe Lo Celso was instead of him or Fernandes at the time, and Jack Clark comes in. Ryan Sessegnon's a bit different. I think everyone wanted Ryan Sessegnon at that point. But still, you kind of go back to then, you think, if you had the mentality of what you want to achieve now, put that with Pochettino back then. And again, the other thing to keep going on at, is this a systematic, constant failure of Tottenham to build on important moments? You know, Spurs and Pochettino got to Champions League final, went off a cliff afterwards. They've just won a European final, you know, Europa League. They've won that. What happens afterwards? They fall off a cliff straight afterwards. It's like, why have they got an inability to, in moments of highs, huge highs for the club? I know they lost the final in 2019, but that was the historic first ever European final they'd been in terms of the European Cup, Champions League, whatever you want to call it, in its different iterations. Why can they not build on these moments?
It's on the club. It has to be because of the, you know, decisions they've made, obviously parting company with Ange, and also who they brought in to replace him is not based on what we've seen, a clear upgrade. And also in the summer of 2019, the recruitment, as we said, was really poor. 2 points I want to make, Ali, quickly. One fan said on Saturday, when we sort of had a little look around before the match at the pre-match protests, I thought it was a brilliant point. I mean, the two biggest wishes of Tottenham supporters were fulfilled last year. They won a major trophy, a European trophy, and Daniel Levy left the club, and somehow Spurs look worse off for it. And it's just incredible. The second point is just on recruitment. I mean, I was speaking to a Tottenham fan I played football with yesterday, and he made a good point. I mean, Spurs have spent money. If we look at recent years, they've bought Dom Solanke for £65 million, or I'm not quite sure if that includes add-ons, but it was worth up to that sort of amount. Xavi Simons as well. But these players, with all due respect, and you know, I think they're good players. They're not really the players that the other top clubs in the Premier League were going to ever be in for. So Spurs then have to shop in this kind of bracket of you know, players that are not quite deemed top level, but they're good. They are top players. I mean, they're European level for sure, and international players, but I don't know. Is that due to the wage structure and not previously wanting to stretch that far? It looks like, obviously, Spurs did try to sign Marc Guéhi and Antoine Semenyo in previous windows, but for whatever reason, haven't quite been able to either convince or offer a financial package big enough to get those players. And then they end up with these kind of players just below that sort of top level. And you look at sort of City strengthening with Guéhi and Semenyo this month. I mean, them two players are two stars that immediately lift Tottenham. I know Guéhi probably is up in the air whether he would play over Romero and Van de Ven, but obviously fans are crying out for signings, and they're really the sort of players that they want. It is difficult because, like, even now I look at the forwards, they need a forward, but who is available? And it's like, you don't just want to throw 60, 70 million down on someone you don't really want, as Frank said. And you've also got the situation, as you mentioned, that you don't really want to spend big money on a manager or a player that fits the manager's style when you don't know if he's going to be here anymore.
Well, that's what they've done over the years. You know, you mentioned it earlier about the different styles of managers. The amount of people that have heard me talking about flip-flopping, and that's what the club always do. And you are left with a squad that's not fit for purpose for the next manager. And then they spend the next 18 months to 2 years just trying to turn that around. And then obviously, it's just an absolute mess. And actually, at some point, we're also going to need to have the debate about Romero and Van de Ven. And you mentioned there about Guéhi kind of, would he have got in? At what point do we say
enough's enough?
Terrific centre-backs, but they keep conceding goals?
Yeah.
It's like how everyone talks about them being potentially the best partnership in the Premier League, yet Spurs leak goals here, there, and everywhere.
Spot
So
on.
At some point, that's got to be questioned as well. You could argue: is it the the goalkeeper behind? Is it the fullbacks? Is it what's in front of them in terms of protection? But certainly, I don't think it can be the absolute perfect centre-back pairing that we always kind of think it is in our head. It's not like, it used to be at Spurs, like, who could you bring in as a striker because you got Harry Kane? I think that's absolutely different because Harry Kane was just an absolute world-class distance kind of above most of the players at Tottenham. And this is the other thing as well that is another thing I'll give towards Frank, is he's the first manager that's having to deal with the post-Kane and Son era.
Yeah.
They've got no star players. They've got no probably you could argue maybe world-class players either. There's a few that could be. Romero can be, I think, on his day. I think Van de Ven can become a world-class player. Again, whether they're absolutely perfect as a partnership as we think they are is another thing. But is it a Tottenham team that, do we have to kind of change our expectations of? Because it is a very different Tottenham team, and they haven't really, as you said, reflected that in the recruitment to make up for losing two huge top players in world football. Well, it's a question for you, really. Is that's got to be factored into the process that they've lost these two huge cornerstones of the club?
Oh, absolutely. I think, looking at Spurs over the past sort of decade, them two have been central to every shot Spurs have had at success. Every top four finish, you look at the numbers and the output from Kane and Son, ridiculous. You're talking about sort of 40 to 50 goals in the Premier League every season. You take those out of Spurs and you've got players now sort of chipping in. I mean, when your top goal scorer is sort of, you might correct me on this, but Richarlison probably with about 7, I think it's chalk and cheese. And Spurs haven't replaced them goals. I think Dominic Solanke was a very adequate signing in place of Kane. I think he brings great qualities to the party in terms of holding the ball up and bringing in the three attackers behind him into play. And, his goal scoring records is decent. It's just not that top level.
Just very quickly on Solanke, just to shove in a quick bit of defence for Solanke. I don't think we've, apart from the injuries, I don't think we've ever seen him have a sustained period at Tottenham where he's been getting the service he would have got at previous on Bournemouth. I think
the
they
team was built around him at Bournemouth, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of feel like I'm waiting to judge him on a time when he's actually got people putting the balls into exactly the areas where he attacks and everything. So
because he is quite ruthless, isn't he? When he does get that service, I mean, some of his goals, he's good in the air. He's a bit of a pest around the box. He's strong as an ox. So I do really like him. It's hard to be overly critical. I just mean, it is an impossible task replacing Kane just because
he's not Kane level. Absolutely
not. No. But it is an impossible task replacing Kane. I think even if you put down 80 million on, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a top striker that's not Erling Haaland, but sort of like a Lautaro Martinez, or I know he was obviously a player that was looked at in the past. I don't think you were ever going to, even if you spent top money, I just don't think anyone would have been as effective as Kane was, because it was the assist as well. Yeah, he was a playmaker as well. And him and Son were just incredible at what they did, and so consistent. So that is a big issue that I think we are underestimating in the whole sort of downfall of Spurs this season, is that you're losing an elite player in Son. Yes, he wasn't as good as what we've been used to over the past sort of 10 years in his final season. And yes, he had injuries, but he's also a figure and a leader that knows the club inside out. You've lost a key player on that front, a player that fans could relate to and knows the DNA of the club.
But Tottenham had a long time to plan for those two potentially going.
They did.
But they've contributed to their own downfall and not building a club around those two properly as well. Definitely.
And, it is difficult. There's so many interesting factors to this whole sort of situation that we find ourselves in. It is hard to tackle all of them, and it is hard to truly know. I mean, until the next manager comes in, we might be saying, well, maybe Thomas Frank wasn't the problem. Maybe it's this group of players, because 2 managers have now been sacked already. that have led them, regardless of the Europa League. So I don't know. Or is there an argument that actually, despite their financial power, Spurs are just not sort of a top 7-8 team anymore? I mean, some fans might say, well, that's outrageous. We've got to be, in that top 7 minimum. But is the squad as good as we think it is? Or, well, I don't think anyone thinks it's very good at the moment.
Well, that's it. They're what are they, 14th? Did they drop down to 15th? No, they're still 14th, aren't they?
Yeah.
Well, clearly they're not a top even 6, 7, 8 team at the moment. Should they be? I think they should be around there, to be honest. Definitely. I think there's enough in that squad. I know there's a lot of injury problems, and this is why the Dortmund match just concerns me so hugely. If Thomas Frank is looking to kind of have any pride in what might be his final game, it's just not good. It's just not good. Not good.
Ali, we're about halfway now, so let's take a little break. There's so much to get stuck into again on the other side of this little interval. Do you want to tell us about the benefits of NordVPN ahead of any Spurs fans looking to make that trip to Frankfurt later this month?
Or just take a break from Tottenham. Anyone might want to just head off and be on a sunny beach somewhere, not thinking about anything to do with Tottenham. We spoke about the stress and how Tottenham only add to stresses in life, seemingly. You might want to escape to another land, another place, and if you do so, absolutely you should be using NordVPN, because it's something I use when I try and escape from Tottenham as much as possible, because I can head off abroad, yet I can access everything I normally would at home, including all my streaming services and things like that, just by making your phone think, or your tablet, whatever you want to use, or laptop, think it's back in the UK. And likewise, if you want to be in the UK, but you want to escape kind of in your mind to somewhere else, you can use NordVPN to making your device think it is abroad, which helps you buy those airplane tickets or book that hotel or even go to a concert somewhere else. Whatever you want to do, sometimes it's easier and cheaper to buy it from the destination country. And if your device thinks it's in that country, that can be an easy way to do it. It also provides you with privacy. It protects your data while you're traveling if you're using public Wi-Fi. You've got NordVPN's threat protection feature, which protects you from viruses and malicious malware and all that sort of horrible stuff that exists out there on the internet right now. And of course, it is the fastest VPN in the world, which means no buffering, no lagging, and you can stream your favorite shows from anywhere in the world without your bandwidth throttling. And on top of all of that, you can get a great discount with us off your NordVPN plan. If you go to nordvpn.com/Talking Tottenham, our link gives you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. And the link, in case you missed it there, is in the podcast episode description box. And I've got a question for you. If I hate to talk about potential replacements in terms of it's a bit of a lack of respect to Thomas Frank, who is still currently in the job. Yeah. However, I feel like we are at a stage now where it's going to be very difficult for him to repair the relationship with the fans. I think that is going to be the thing that does him, really. I think had this been back in the day, I guess the best comparison maybe is Venkatesham and Arteta at a time when there were no fans in the stadium because of the pandemic. Yeah. And he kind of wasn't getting that constant, very awful feedback or strong feedback that Thomas Frank's getting right now. And I think it'll be the fan thing that does for him if he doesn't work some incredible miracles in the next game or two. And it kind of means we do have to talk about a what next scenario, because Spurs will have had to plan and we have to kind of think about it as well. Who would you look at if you were Tottenham Hotspur?
Glad you asked me this, Ali, because I have just got up the shortlist from the bookies for the favourites to be the potential next Tottenham manager if they do part company with Thomas Frank. One name that I think would actually be very, very interested, and I'm intrigued to know, fans listening, feel free to let us know in the comments section how it would go down. Ruben Amorim. I think it's one of those that probably wouldn't be well received, but actually might be smart. I mean, the cultural shift we saw at Manchester United under him, I think he actually might have done a lot of the the groundwork for another manager to come in and sort of take a lot of the glory for a change. And, you know, a lot of people might say, what are you on about? You know, he's just been sacked. I think I've seen United sort of steadily improve. And yes, they've had no European football. Carrick sort of come in on Saturday and done a tactical masterclass on Guardiola, which, you know, many fans will say, well, Amorim wouldn't have been capable of that because he's so rigid in terms of playing that back three and he was so set in his ways. But I think he's a smart guy. And in terms of what he did for the cultural shift at United, in terms of installing principles again, you know, he wasn't afraid to drop players and sort of be ruthless. I think Onana was one of those players that was just cast aside. I know Kobbie Mainoo was also sort of harshly treated, but I kind of like that authority that he has. Tactically, obviously, at Sporting, done great things as well. Although, you know, the Portuguese league, with all due respect, sometimes isn't the best yardstick. I think he's one that needs to be at least in the conversation. The other ones, the favourites at the moment are Xavi Hernandez, who I think fans, I would imagine, would probably like. I mean, he's come from Barcelona, plays fairly attractive.
He has the name, doesn't he? I think that's
the name and the profile. I think the top pick would be slightly ambitious, but Xabi Alonso. I mean, personally, I think, you know, given on the slot situation at Liverpool, I think it's fair to say that he would probably be in the conversation towards the end of the season if things don't improve. I mean, what's interesting is obviously Slot was on Tottenham's radar once upon a time.
He was.
So there's that. There's Glasner, who obviously looks like he's going to stay with Palace at the moment, but will be available at the end of the season. Poch, Maresca, Marco Silva, who I would stay clear from with the greatest respect. I just don't see him as a manager that would do well at Spurs.
100% behind you on that. 100%.
Yeah. Roberto De Zerbi.
Well, that would be interesting. That would be more chaos.
That would end in disaster as well. Then comes Robbie Keane. Iriola as well was another one, obviously out of contract at the end of the season. But again, I just don't see him having that kind of charisma to come in and change the direction of a football club. So I think one of the sort of, it would have to be probably you'd have to try for Xabi Alonso. I mean, again, I don't want to be disrespectful to Thomas Frank, but the direction of travel does look like, you know, we have to be having conversations about who might be replacing him. Lots in there, Ali. What's your kind of assessment of some of those names?
Some really interesting names. I would, in a dream world, I think Xabi Alonso is probably the one that I would want to go for. Spurs would have to approach with the most incredible project, the most incredible, here's exactly what we're going to spend for you.
Be the keys, wouldn't it, to the Tottenham?
Yeah, essentially. 100%. And I do feel like the Real Madrid, and I know this is a ridiculous comparison, but I do feel like what the Real Madrid job and the Spurs job have in common, that if you're sacked, it doesn't mean anything in your CV, really. I think if you get sacked from Real Madrid, people are a bit like, yeah, it's a bit of a madhouse, isn't it? You were still a great manager before that. And I think
you saw what happened with him. It was ridiculous after the Super Cup.
Absolutely mad. And you look at Spurs, every manager that's left Spurs pretty much goes on and does something decent, goes on and wins a trophy probably half the time. I don't think people use that as any kind of something to beat a manager with, because I think they just know it's Spurs. It's a strange club. Very, unfortunately, the past shows it's quite a difficult club to achieve in. You know, to succeed in. Even the ones that everyone thought they would. Amorim, I think that's a question of timing. Had he replaced, let's say, he came in after Conte and instead of Postecoglou, I think fans would have lapped it up. I think coming in now with exactly like you say, they're a very rigid, set, singular, almost way of playing. I think some fans that didn't like Ange Postecoglou are going to think, well, that's another one of that. Some fans will also maybe look at, he liked a back three, and that'll bring back some of the Conte kind of fears that they had. Although technically Alonso he played a three at
Leverkusen,
Germany, Leverkusen, So, I mean, that might be something that Spurs fans have to kind of get their head around, the back three, depending on who comes in. I think we spoke about Paratici before. If Paratici was involved in any way, you can guarantee it would either be a manager who's worked or previously worked in Serie A, or someone that is Jorge Mendes connected, because it seems to be his go-to list of candidates for pretty much managers and players, really.
I think Farioli at Porto would be an interesting pick. I know he's a name that's been sort of linked with various English vacancies in recent times. I think Chelsea supposedly were interested, but he's a sort of a De Zerbi disciple. I think he worked under him previously, done well at Nice, went to Ajax, just missed out on the league, and is now at Porto doing really well with an incredible defensive record. But apparently, I'm told he plays attacking football, so I think he's one that might at least be in the conversation.
It has to be, doesn't it? There's Vincenzo Italiano was another one that was kind of linked.
Bologna?
Yes.
Fiorentina got to the Conference League final, was it?
I think so. And I think the big one is Glasner. I think this is the other issue Spurs have right now is the United post. And there will be a bit of a shootout maybe for a couple of managers if Thomas Frank is to go. And I think Glasner's one that kind of comes into the conversation because, again, back three again, but you've told me before we even started about it, he's got a bit of history of being, that's not his main tactic, is it?
No, well, obviously, I was the same as you. I assumed that he'd played, a back three wherever he's been. But I saw some quotes from him. Actually, I think it was in the press conference, and he said, I'm because I think he was asked whether he'd ever changed from back three. He said, "I've not been a back three manager my whole career." He said something like, "I played a 4-2-3-1 at Wolfsburg, got a top 5 finish. I won the Europa League at Eintracht with, I think it was I'm not sure. I think it was a 4-3-3, maybe. Someone might be able to point me in the right direction once I check. But he is very tactically flexible. It's more just he picks whatever system, suits the squad that he inherits. But I would probably say, given the success he's had at Palace with the back three, it might be something that he looks at, which might not be something that's very well received amongst supporters. But yeah, if Glasner was to come in, I'm sure that he wouldn't sort of pigeonhole himself to using that back three.
Yeah, I think he would probably be quite a popular appointment if he were to come in. And the situation of Palace is a really interesting one, isn't it? Because he's essentially almost like the door's open now to him to say whatever he wants because he's in a foul mood at what's happened at Palace. And it's a difficult situation. Everyone's being sold from under him and everything. Palace obviously want to expect and want him to stay to the end of the season because there'll be fears of a bit of a free fall there. But also, in a similar vein to Gay and what happened there, if you were to throw money at Palace and say, look, we want him now, you can get another manager in and you're not just going to lose him for free in the summer, maybe it's something that they end up having to look at. But then also, Man United being linked with Glasner, if they see Spurs considering that, do they think, well, mate, that's one of the ones that we potentially wanted as well? And also,
the great irony, is that Thomas Frank would probably be a decent candidate for the Palace vacancy.
Brendan Johnson would be like, oh no, it's like, what?
Oh my god, that would be brilliant. Well, not for Brennan. The other point I wanted to make with Glasner, which is what I find interesting, two things actually. One, I've seen a lot of people say, well, the whole reason he's been so effective at Palace is because his tactics are designed for not having the ball. So being a counter-attacking side that sort of sits deep, explodes on the counter-attack, which obviously we saw under Mourinho and sometimes under Conte at Spurs. And obviously it's not been universally popular because fans like attacking football. I mean, any time I've seen Palace have to sort of be the aggressor and have the ball against a team that maybe comes to Selhurst Park and sits deep themselves, Palace look short of ideas. They don't look like a team that knows how to break a team down. And interestingly,
that's my fear with him, is that he ends up getting the Spurs fan treatment because of the football.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing I wanted to point out, was there was a great video that was translated of Glasner at Eintracht absolutely going off on one about the lack of funds, and that basically he was having to play, sort of a 38-year-old midfielder, Hasebe. He's Japanese, he's retired now, but he had to play him 3 times a week, and apparently he was urinating blood because he was so exhausted.
Oh my word.
But Glasner was making the point that similarly at Palace, he was so short of numbers that he was, having a right go at the board because he hadn't been having this support. And of course, at Spurs, there will be finances. So I'm interested to see it. Probably be the first time in his career. Exactly. So he's got experience for that. But it's probably the first time Glasner would ever be given sort of a decent transfer kitty to sort of sculpt his team. Obviously, the squad is fairly big when everyone's fit, but I do find it interesting in the prospect of Glasner rocking up at Spurs because it's different. And as we say, we sort of use Crystal Palace as kind of what we'd expect to see from him at Tottenham, but actually I'm not sure whether that would be the case.
Yeah, I mean, I think Spurs fans would take him initially as a good appointment, but my fear with Glasner is the football, and I do, and I think a lot of the kind of the arguments that were made about Frank to begin with, and he's tactically flexible, he'll change, and everything will be made about Glasner, and then we'll see whether that is actually true of going forward. For me, there's two candidates in my head. If we're kind of, I don't know whether they're both to do with the heart rather than the head. I don't know. And funnily enough, I was talking with my wife about this yesterday. One of them, of course, is the one that will be on a lot of Spurs fans' lips, will be Mauricio Pochettino, of course, with the difficulties, though, obviously, with the World Cup and everything that comes with that, and it would being a later appointment. And she made the point, which I found really interesting, was she said, but what if it's rubbish? What if he can't recapture what he had and his whole legacy? His whole legacy is ruined. And my reply to her was, there's every chance that could happen, but what an incredible first week. The first week would be the most kind of almost like such a romantic thing about Tottenham. There would be this real kind of, come on, let's do what you weren't able to do. Here's a bit of money, kind of get the gang back together, although he can't really. They've all kind of gone off and retired unless he was able to get Kane back. They haven't retired. Sorry. A few of them have actually. No, Alasdair and Vertonghen have retired, haven't they? I think it would be the most incredible first press conference. But there is the chance that what he's done since has maybe not justified. Although some people say at Chelsea that he actually did a lot of good there and brought a lot of the kind of the young players on and everything. And
I think so.
And he wasn't as bad as kind of what people made out the situation be. The other name, and maybe this is because of Pochettino, when we were looking at when we knew there had to be a replacement for Postecoglou, my pick at the time was Iraola. I love his football in terms of it's just wonderful to watch. It reminded me of kind of Pochettino football. It is breakneck, exciting. It is going to push players to the limit, absolutely, in terms of their pressing and work rate and everything. But my goodness, it's fun. And that's the thing with me. And I know there'll be some doubts there, and I know he hasn't really been able to sustain the momentum at Bournemouth, but he is absolutely capable of beating any big side at any time when they're on song. And I just wonder if you put him into a different role in a different club with a bit more money. Also, a striker he got the very best out of as well in Dominic Solanke. There is a part of me that, I can't lie. He was the one I kind of wanted after it was known that Postecoglou was going. Thomas Frank was a reasonable, good choice in my mind, but Iraola was the one that I kind of felt had the Poch vibes, and that was how Spurs succeeded back in the day, or almost succeeded. So I would still like him to be a candidate. Whether he is or not, we'll see. I mean, Xavi, other than the fact that we'll be talking about Xavi managing Xavi, which I find an incredible thing to have to write about, we're going to have to use their surnames all the time. The other thing about him, my fear with him is how he exists outside the Barcelona bubble. That's 100%. My big thing with him. I know he's managed in Saudi.
Qatar, I think it was.
Qatar. So, it's a different world. That's different to the Premier League, and I don't know. I think it's far easier to operate within a crazy club that you know well than a crazy club you don't. And that would mean my fear. I actually think interim-wise, I know he's done well in his first game, but I actually think Carrick would have been a terrific interim coach for Spurs. Maybe would have put down a claim for the job full time. Who knows? Or there's younger ones. There's Kieran McKenna's got the connection to Spurs. Is that someone that they go for? The problem is now, how long is the process to bring in the next manager, and do they trust the original process that brought them Thomas Frank? It's such a problem, isn't it?
It is. I think you made a great point about Iraola there, actually. I mean, I've covered a fair bit of Bournemouth over the past 2 to 3 years since he's arrived from Rayo Vallecano. And you have to say, well, when you said about the football, every time I've seen them, you're right, it's been brilliant, so entertaining. And I never used to mind when I'd be sort of told that I'd have to go down there, because it's about a 6 hour, 7 hour round trip for me. But the value for money was there. And I think that's what fans want to see, really. You're right about the process. I think that is going to ultimately dictate, which candidates are realistic in terms of timing. Do they wait until the end of the season, or do they go now? And I think it's also just to move it on to this week. I think, again, it's a case of timing. You touched on it, just how quick of a turnaround it is to this week to actually maybe consider relieving Frank of his duties. Just on Dortmund, Ali, before we go, obviously what's gone under the radar is just how much sort of injury ravaged and in terms of the lack of availability Spurs have, which means Paul Frank is basically, he's almost sort of, what's the term? He's almost, I don't really know what I'm trying to say.
Thrown him to the wolves in a way.
Exactly. That's the best way of describing
even an interim manager, it would be like, would you want to put him into this situation?
Exactly. So it's like, it's basically an impossible task in some respects. I mean, Dortmund, you never quite know how they're going to fare in Europe because they're such an up and down team. But it looks like, obviously, Conor Gallagher and Yves Bissouma both ineligible. Archie Gray went off at half-time. João Palhinha, we're not sure. You might know by the time this podcast goes out whether he's fit. And then I also saw Xavi Simons limping very heavily through the mix zone after that tackle from Jared Bowen. I think it was a sort of an ankle lower leg issue. I assume he'll be okay, but we'll know more this afternoon. Pedro Porro was limping. He should be fine. And then you've got the registration issue with Solanke.
Ben Davis. Don't forget Ben Davis.
I mean, he suffered an awful injury, which could be very, very serious. And the other one I want to touch upon, actually, is Pat Matassar. Obviously, yesterday, Senegal win the Africa Cup of Nations. But from what I understand, he actually had to go to hospital because he fell ill at half-time of the final. And there's kind of, I can't really speculate, but a lot of the Senegal, as much as I can, a lot of the Senegal players believe there was actually foul play involved because 3 of their players were hospitalised and felt ill. 2 during the warm-up. Niang, who plays for Union Saint-Gilloise in Belgium, and Crepin Diatta, who plays for Monaco. Both of those pulled up in the warm-up and felt very sick.
They didn't have lasagna.
Well, I don't know if it was quite the... was it 2006 lasagna gate?
Oh, yes.
But those accusations are kind of flying about. I have contacted Spurs about Sarr. I suspect we will get a update in the press conference later. I think he's okay, but obviously very concerning for him to sort of be ill. And also, from what I understand, through the digging that I've done, Senegal are expected to parade the trophy in Dakar tomorrow. So if that's the case, obviously, there's minimal chance of Sarr sort of flying back to London and being involved in this game against Dortmund, which means virtually, unless Palhinha and Gray are able to prove their fitness, Frank has no midfield. Obviously, we've got injuries all over the park as well in terms of other
Van der Ven suspended.
Van der Ven is suspended. That's another one.
So much.
I think Thomas Frank will be dusting off his Copa Mundials at this rate, but... The problem is, as we said, is that, you are throwing Frank to the wolves. I mean, this has to be the game. Again, I was speaking to one of my friends who supports Spurs. He said, one game last season that I won't forget, and that was probably the best game at the Spurs stadium all season, Elfsborg. We've touched upon it before. 3 youngsters, I think, scoring. And that night was just about Tottenham's identity, really. And maybe tomorrow night, just maybe, is a game where we see a couple of youngsters. I would love that to be the case, Ali. Obviously, they've got the Youth League match as well, I believe.
Yes. Oh, I forgot about that. I've got to go to that, haven't I? I completely forgot that's tomorrow. I'm going to have to cover that. Absolutely. Yeah. The only thing I would say, and this is what worries me the most, this is no Elfsborg. With no intended disrespect to Elfsborg. Dortmund, they lost once, I think, in the Bundesliga this season. They're above Spurs in the Champions League table as well. I think they are. This is
Spurs need to win as well.
They have to win. It is pretty much one of the worst kind of out of their group other than PSG, out of their run of fixtures other than PSG that they could have had at this time for Thomas Frank with the situation that's going on with players. Gray was heavily whacked, wasn't he, in the game? He looked like his knee potentially. Did you see him coming out of the mix zone? He looked like he was walking okay on the pitch afterwards.
I didn't see him. I wonder if he was one of the players that quickly made off because there was a few. But yeah, I mean, it is concerning. I mean, you said it straight away that looked bad, and he didn't continue, did he? So
no, he didn't come back out for the second half, and it's the irony of Bissouma playing pretty well, other than a little late mistake that kind of let Wilson. He was really good, and he showed. This is a frustrating thing with Bissouma. On his game, he can be one of the best around in midfield, but on his day, he is not enough. He's just not consistent enough. I'm trying to think who you could have in midfield.
Bergvall would have to be.
It could be Bergvall, but even Bergvall, he didn't want to bring him on till the very end. So is he even fit enough right now to play and start a game? I would imagine Paulini will do everything in his power to be able to play. I think. So that's one.
If not Callum Olasesi, I would love to see, but
Callum would be great. It's a huge jump for him. It's a huge. He hasn't even had a loan in senior football yet. He's a really talented young player, but that's a big ask. I wonder whether they would instead go with. Oh, they can't. I was about to say go with the back three, but Dragishin's not registered. You've only got Romero and Danso, haven't you? Davies can't play at centre back. Am I forgetting anyone on the centre backs? I think that's it, isn't it? Romero and Danso.
That's it. Yeah.
Again, unless you bring in a Janai Byfield or Malachi Hardy, and then you're just still doing the same thing. It's incredible, really. You've got a Doggy, maybe will be ready to start. The issue with Tellen Solanke is, yes, they Spurs can make a decision today, essentially. It's got to be done by the end of today, I think, before close of play, that you can either keep telling your squad or you can say Solanke is fit enough, we'll bring him back in. That's how I understand it works. So I wonder, I guess much depends on whether they feel Dominic Solanke is fit enough to start. And bearing in mind, he's only played, 10 minutes and 30-ish minutes thus far. I don't know whether you'd feel that he could start a game and play an hour just a couple of days after that half hour. So in that case, you probably go with Tell. Yeah. But then you are left with the same lineup and setup as they had the other day, which was utterly dreadful, Tell apart. Callum Moani was horrendous, I felt, at the weekend. He just did nothing a striker should be doing. Audebert it was one of his big lightweight performances where nothing he really did made any impact whatsoever. That's interesting. Just a little thing that, because this will probably come out anyway while it's happening. The player who will be doing the press conference alongside Thomas Frank is going to be Xavi Simons. Maybe that's a good sign that he might be available. But yeah, I was trying to think who else. But in terms of, who would you do? Tell or Solanke? Which one do you pick?
I think probably Tell, because I think if you start Solanke, the problem is you risk maybe, affecting his sort of recovery plan and how many minutes he was supposed to get, because he had such a long time off. So I think it's going to be a high intensity game, and even if you play him for an hour, I think, is his body quite ready for that? Do you want to risk maybe losing him?
It's the worst swap, isn't it? Could have been for anyone else. If it was for Callum Moani, I don't think it's even a question. I think you swap him. But if it's Tell,
I don't think so. I think you need Callum Moani at the moment. As much as he was terrible on Saturday, you're absolutely right. I think you need him at the moment. I think he'll start.
Make me look dumb.
He'll start.
I think he has to start. I don't think there's anyone else. Unless Dane Scarlett starts, which I can't see him doing.
I'm looking forward to reading your predicted 11, Ali, because it's a real chaotic situation, isn't it? Really,
it's mad, and it's
and
one
this
of
is
those.
what I mean about, I've said it already, but Paul Frank tomorrow. I mean, you can only imagine he deserves a bit of leeway tomorrow, because I think Tottenham are going into this
He
match.
will
Is
not
anyone
get
actually?
leeway.
I know, but Tottenham are going into this match, and you can't see any way that they win.
No, and just create chances, I think, is going to be difficult. And I think the crowd who are there, and I think it's going to be a lower crowd by the looks of it as well, they're just going to get annoyed. If Spurs concede a goal, early on, it's going to be a horrendous atmosphere. It's almost like, I get why they've kind of not made any decision yet in that regard. But also, it is putting in. I mean, if the press conference is bad enough, the match is going to be horrendous for him if it turns quickly. It's going to be such an awful atmosphere for him. It's going to be one of the strangest kind of 24 hours or so in terms of covering Spurs in a press conference and a match where you kind of know the managers may be going beforehand, which we don't often have. I mean, we've had a manager essentially sacked at half-time in Martin Jol, where everyone knew in the second half that he was going. But I'm not sure we've had too many games where we kind of knew they were almost, like I said, unfortunately, a dead man walking, which, look, I would love it to be the other way. I genuinely would, because he is such a good guy and he's trying to pour his heart into this job. He's upset Spurs fans by saying things I don't think he's always realised upset Spurs fans. And he's upset them in the way he plays as well, which sometimes has been forced upon him, sometimes has been by his own decisions, like the substitution at the weekend, taking Tell off, was utterly ridiculous, and it just completely nullified a lot of what Spurs did. Yes, they scored a few minutes later, but that was not because of the sub, that was because of a centre-back going up front. But yeah, I just fear for him tomorrow. I really do. Just quickly before we go, you saw someone else in the mix zone, didn't you?
I did. I was going to touch upon this, and there's one thing I want to bounce back on you as well. After Sousa headed into the dressing room, this was about an hour after the game, so it was very sort of, a lot of the players had left already, but he was with a lady that I assume might work for Spurs. I'm not sure, maybe someone that's helping him with the language, but they went into the dressing room. He was obviously sat in the stadium for the game as well. I put the picture out, and a lot of people were commenting, poor lad, and all this, because he's just witnessed an absolute sort of a disaster. Ali, you might be able to tell us a bit more on when he might be officially through the door, because he's not even been confirmed yet. But also, Ali, I just wanted to touch on really quickly. We had a little walk out before the game to the protest, but obviously a surprising kind of lack of numbers, really. I know. Sorry, we've sort of skated over this.
I know. No, even the match. We've barely spoken about the match. And Conor Gallagher made his debut, by the way, everyone. And he was all right. He was okay. It's a difficult game to come into. It was,
by the way, as well, never missed a game through injury in his career. 15 seconds in, head injury.
Oh, my goodness. We were all just watching like, no, not even in the world of Spurs, surely. But thankfully he was okay. But it's just annoying that he can't play, because he would absolutely be needed tomorrow night. Where were we? Yeah. So Sousa or Sosa, as different people have told me. I've had so many different versions of that name told me by people from Brazil as well, have told me different pronunciations. I'm going with Sousa for now, but I don't think that's right. I think we'll see that in the next couple of days. The issue with that is it just feels like the worst possible time to put anything out about a new signing. I mean, even as we've been doing this podcast, Spurs wished happy birthday to Stefan Freund. The replies underneath are absolutely not very friendly on a birthday. So imagine what a poor lad Sousa would get. He's even done his goodbye to Santos. He's put that on Instagram. He's got teammates saying goodbye. The deal is essentially done. I think they're just waiting for these last documents. And I think he will be doing apparently there's some news in Ireland at the moment that Dele Alli might be signing for Bohemians in a 6-month deal.
I heard that whisper.
Yeah, I missed that one. Where was I? God, there's so much news. It's incredible. So Sousa, I think he'll get an ESC work permit. I think is the one he'll have to get, which is ones for players that aren't going to get the necessary points normally, but are seen as an exciting one for the future. So he's a potential, hopefully through the door soon, and maybe we get to see. I know it's awful what's happened to Ben Davies. It looked bad. He had oxygen he was being given. I hope that's not the last time we see Ben Davies in a Spurs shirt, but it may well be because of the nature of it. We'll find out today. But, you know, in terms of an arrival, you've got a left back coming in. I know it's going to be a big ask to perform straight away, but there's another body in the squad, even though he can't play Champions League for now. The protest, I don't really feel it's right to judge the protest too much on numbers, purely because the timing changed a bit, didn't it? We had the Gallagher announcement. We had Venkatesham's letter, which I felt addressed a lot of the communication concerns that kind of were leading to the protest. And yeah, we went down and spoke to a few. I think it had been a little bit bigger by the time we got there. It was my fault. I suggested, didn't I, to us that maybe we waited, because it was a 2:00 meetup, I think, and I suggested maybe we wait 5-10 minutes to let it build a bit. But I think actually it went the other way. I think maybe people had dispersed by that point.
Yeah.
So I think there were about 100 we were told to begin with, and when we got there, it was probably 40, 50 maybe. But look, it's important to have your say. If people feel that things are not being done in the right way, or they want to force issues or whatever, that's part of life, let alone football. So yeah, we spoke to a number of them, and a lot of people made a lot of good points. And I guess the proof now will be in the pudding. And even Venkatesham said it and we haven't even really gone into his message, which was a really interesting, long and detailed message talking about expanding the wage structure, backing the team. And obviously in all of this, we haven't even spoken about how well the women's team are doing. They're like the saving grace of Tottenham right now. They're doing so well. But also, yeah, he spoke about it, the key being actions, not words. And that's it. That's absolutely what I think the coming weeks are about with Spurs. They've got to just act, whether that is winning on the pitch, whether that is changing manager, whatever it is, they need to act, and they need to sign players, and they need to strengthen this club, because otherwise, I'm with you. I feel like they could slide down that table quite scarily. So so much needs to be done. And I feel like our next podcast is going to be a very interesting one as well.
Well, we don't quite know what's going to happen over the next couple of days, but what we do definitely know is we'll both be at the game, Ali, tomorrow night against Dortmund. You're off to Hotspur away shortly for open training and the press conference. Thank you for all the great feedback we've had on recent episodes. It's great to see more of you tuning in. Feel free to check in on football.london's website later for all the great coverage Ali will be providing. Lots of interesting stuff to delve into. We'll probably have an update on Pat Matasar and Ben Davies, and also whether Spurs have chosen to stick with Matthias Tell or bring Dominic Solanke potentially back in. And then I'm also looking forward to seeing your predicted lineup, Ali, as well, as I said. So that one should be very interesting. To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, please go to nordvpn.com/talkingtottenham. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and the link is in the podcast episode description box below.